Of all the ways to throw away years of your life, staying in an unhappy or sick relationship is probably the most common and probably the most miserable. But how do you know whether it's the relationship or you that's causing the misery? That could be terrible too, right? Leaving a relationship that if you just changed something about yourself or got honest about something or accepted the other person, maybe that would have turned out to be the great love of your life. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm talking the way my mind used to think when I was miserable in a relationship. And today I'm going to throw a lifeline to two letter writers who reached out to me recently about the confusion they're feeling right now. The first one is a woman I'll call Rachel. Okay? She says, "Dear Anna, I'm 42 and I only learned or accepted that I grew up abused a few years ago when I had a falling out with my mom. I always knew my mom could fly off the handle and would be violent and terrifying to us when we were young. Looking back, I now know what it was. There was no regard for our needs or feelings. In fact, I took a lot of abuse as an adult from her, even though I did everything I could to please her, including moving across the country to be closer to her, which started the cycle of abuse all over again. Still, I always fell short, and she is and was constantly mad at me. My question, though, isn't about my mom at all, but that background will help you to see why I'm asking this question." It is relevant. So now we change subjects on what Rachel's asking. "I married my husband at 21 when I naively believed he shared my beliefs and values and had the same life plans. I realized shortly after he needed much more control over me, and then I realized that I was never getting my way in anything. But in our belief system, the man is the head of the house, so I submitted a lot. And he lived a great life of having a wife who basically did whatever he said and always getting his way. Then my husband had an affair, which was shocking and devastating. I had a part-time job at my kids' school and little resources, and having moved across the country to be closer to my parents, I had no friends and nowhere to go. So I forgave him, and we tried to move on. And we did for a while until I found out it happened again days before the pandemic lockdowns began and we got trapped together. Telephone therapy helped us manage getting through the pandemic, and his intense efforts to show me he loves me sucked me back in. Plus, my oldest is graduating high school, so it seemed like maybe not the best of times to divorce. So now, post-pandemic life is beginning to resume and things are okay. And we have a pretty nice life outside our relationship. At this point, things are civil and even fun sometimes, although I don't love him like I used to. I would divorce him and look for a deeper, more caring love. However, I wonder and hesitate because I have one more in high school, and I wonder if it's better to just keep things stable for him and leave after he goes to college. I've heard a lot of people say it's better for the kids if you wait until they're out of the house, but others see no value in that, so I'm confused. I worked really hard to be a great mom and never abuse my kids and to give them attention and meet their emotional needs, and I think I've done really well, although to be honest, it was incredibly hard sometimes. The kids are my priority, so I'll do whatever is best for them. I have great relationships with my kids, but especially my youngest is very connected to his dad. Should I wait out the 3 years, doing therapy and healing as much as I can before then, or get out and try to find a love I believe I deserve now?" Signed, Rachel. Okay, Rachel, I'm so glad you wrote. This sounds like a really hard situation, partly because you're making it work so well. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence at all. I included this part about your mom and her abuse of you and her total inability to see your feelings and needs, because I think that, like so many of us with childhood trauma, you have recreated your conditions of childhood. Not on purpose, obviously, but what tends to happen sometimes is intense stress in childhood causes our thinking to shut down during critical decisions, like deciding to get married at age 21 to someone who you thought had similar values and life plans but didn't. Now, Rachel, I got to tell you off the bat, I don't know anything about your husband, but I'm not hearing that you know what your values and life plans are. So it sounds like, for perfectly good reasons, I assume, you have changed. This life you chose for yourself, where some man is the head of the household and you submit, I'm not hearing that you're kind of in that value system anymore. I know many people in traditional religions who have that arrangement. I also know people in unconventional ways of life, like submission and domination, which is roughly similar. And if both people agree, it's cool. It's fine for people to get into any kind of relationship dynamic that makes them happy. But at age 21, I do question whether you had the maturity to choose that lifestyle, and especially because it's an extremely unconventional lifestyle. Wherever you are, you're surrounded by people who are not on board with this idea that women are supposed to be submissive. And I don't think you're on board with it because of what you're dreaming about is finding somebody new, because that's not part of that value system. And obviously, your husband broke the value system by cheating. But all of these things, like longing for something different, infidelity, all of these things can happen to good people, but they have a way of breaking the relationship. So Rachel, I'm just going to say, what I'm hearing from your letter is that you didn't get the support and recognition and seeing, like your mom or parents did not see you and recognize who you are enough to help you get a sense of self. And I can see the appeal of this life. And again, not knocking it. I've had people do this to me too, where they didn't approve of something that I chose for myself, and they'd say patronizingly, but I can see why you needed that. And I don't want to say that to you. I want to assume that you fully chose your way of life, but you're changing your mind right now. You want to be divorced. And divorce is not totally part of the value system. Here's what I'm hearing, Rachel. You need some time. You need some time to get a self again. Or maybe for the first time. Maybe you didn't get to have that growing up. Because what you were saying is, I put my kids first, I'll do whatever it takes for them. Now that's commendable. It sounds like you've done a good job of parenting. But okay, so you've projected all the good, I'll do everything for them. And then you say, or I'll get a new man. But who never got into the story here of what you're looking for is trying to discern, like, who are you, Rachel? What are you here on earth to do? And given that your kids are about to fly the coop here and grow up, who are you? What are you here to do? What are your gifts to bring? And it sounds like the preparation isn't there. You've been really identified with other people's agenda your whole life. And that's really good for the kids. It's good that you put them first. But everything else sounds like a ripoff, honestly. I think you got ripped off. And it's not too late. You're 42. Lots and lots and lots of us struggle till at least that age. So there's a lot of time for you. But here's what I'm going to suggest to you is that the reason you leave is not so that you can just go get another man. Hold off on that. The best thing for the kids is for you to hold off on that. You may not have thought this through, but if your kids were to see you jump right into another relationship, assuming one would manifest for you, if some guy would appear on the horizon, they would be really uncomfortable about that. That would put them in a very tough position. That's one of the reasons why divorce while kids are minors is hard. But you can mitigate that difficulty by just postponing that. It'd be good for you and it'd be good for them. I always say what's good for the kids is good for me. And you can postpone that. You have 3 years till the youngest goes to college. You can not date for 3 years. But I totally hear that you might want to get out of this marriage. And I don't know if it's right for you. You're going to decide that. And what I would encourage you to do is decide, is it worth it? Is it the right thing for you to leave this marriage if you're to go be a single parent and soon a single person with kids out of the house? All right. And it is hard that your support system is across the country. That is hard. You're there supporting your mom, and yet being around her is toxic for you. So I don't know. I'm getting this sort of idea that across the country could be great. On the other hand, you have a minor child who probably needs to be near their dad. So if you want my 2 cents, maybe stick it out outside the marriage for a few years till you are single, then get back home where all your friends are. Sometimes being away from people who bring out the worst in you, which for you is this submissive, lose your soul, lose your bearings, not remember who you are, feel unloved. For you to lose that takes healing. And the healing solution is usually not to jump into another relationship. If you were to jump into a relationship, odds are extremely high as a person with CPTSD that the new relationship would have most of the yucky characteristics of the last one. And it's a fantasy that if only somebody new came along, everything would be totally different. Because wherever we go, there we are. So whatever your baggage is, whatever those spiritual holes are for you, if you can heal those first, and then when you meet somebody, you can meet somebody who matches who you are healed. And that's going to be a much better thing for you. Because at this age, like I'm thinking, somebody for the long haul, for the whole rest of your life. So I support you whatever you decide to do, Rachel. but please put yourself first right now. I think you've got this, and I think your kids are in good standing, and they can turn out all right whether you stay with your husband or leave, but it would definitely help if you remain unattached to a new partner so long as they're living with you. All right. So, on a similar theme, I'm going to go on to a second letter, and this one is from somebody named Belinda. And Belinda writes, "Hi, my mother is an abusive alcoholic who I've had no contact with for a few years now." You see, there's a theme here. I've got women who had an abusive mother who end up in relationships. Well, you're going to hear what Belinda's in. Okay. The abuse was physical from her mom, emotional, and it was neglect. And although the emotional was the worst, my father and I were extremely close, but he worked overseas, and from the ages of 6 to 14, he was only with me every weekend, so he didn't know the abuse was going on. He passed away when I was 16. I'm 24 now, and his loss was extremely traumatic for me. The only safe, unconditional love I had is now gone. Anyway, that's just background information. Isn't that cool? In 1 week, 2 people wrote to me with a story about their mothers, and then as background to tell me about the men in their lives. Belinda says, "I've been in several relationships since the age of 16, 6 of them in fact, but my current is the hardest I've ever been in, and I would describe some of his behaviors as abusive, but I'm not entirely sure." When in doubt, right? When we met, I was an extremely social, outgoing, confident person. However, I did have some unhealthy habits. I was emotionally volatile and used relationships as an anchor. My partner is an extremely avoidant person. He has trouble leaving his house due to severe anxiety, but he's extremely smart and was very kind when we met. He had a lot of trauma in his childhood. He was also abused. When he was 14, he found his father after his father had taken his own life. So as you can imagine, he has many issues. Yeah. Since we've been together, I've grown more and more introverted. I now rarely leave my house and find social interaction very difficult. He's had a bad temper in the past. He took full responsibility for his rage, but said that certain ways I communicate make him feel trapped. We have endless circular arguments where he thinks I've hurt him and I think he's hurt me. Anyway, I feel like he's gaslighting me. He's endlessly trying to convince me that my way of seeing things is wrong. I don't trust my own perception, and my self-worth is on the floor. But when I bring it up with him, he tells me he would never intentionally gaslight me, and that all of the pain and suffering I'm describing, he feels too. He says that he's confused too, and that he's hurt too, and that he feels like I've mistreated him too. I can't tell if he's the one damaging me or I'm the one damaging him. I feel like I'm a loving partner, but he tells me that's not how he feels. Believe it or not, when things are good, we have an incredible connection. We laugh and sing together. We have the same values. My question is, should I leave or should I try to make this work? I know that this relationship has been really bad for me. It's eroded me. I just got to go back to that. Should I leave? I know it's been really bad for me. It's eroded me. There's an answer kind of screaming there. We'll talk about this. But part of me, we've been talking about this, you mean you, is holding on to him getting better. He wants to start medication and start therapy. I know that my childhood was traumatic enough and I'm just adding to it with this relationship, but the idea of leaving is so deeply painful and terrifying, and I have no outside support. I'd be completely alone. I have no parents to ask for guidance. I have no one to fall back on. I would really, really appreciate your advice. Thank you, Belinda. Okay, Belinda, I will stand in for your mom here, but not the mom who was awful to you, but in the mother role. And I'm just going to say, when you're in a relationship where you find yourself cutting yourself off from other people, feeling terrible, growing introverted, it's just a sign. It's a sign that the relationship isn't healthy for you. And I tried a thought experiment when I read your letter where, you think he's the one hurting you. He thinks, you guys each think the other one. It's probably a bit of both. You guys both have enough trauma to kind of qualify you to have CPTSD. And people with unhealed CPTSD can be really hard on their partners. So maybe he's, gaslighting. I don't know. There's not enough details here. I just know that him being him and you being you is resulting in both of you feeling really hurt. And in the last part of your letter, you say several things about like, I know that this has been really bad for me. It's eroded me. And I'm just adding to my trauma with this relationship, but I'd be totally alone. Okay, I totally hear you, Belinda. You know what you're dealing with? It's called abandonment melange. And I've been talking about Pete Walker's work a lot, and he defines this feeling that I know so well and so many of us do. He calls it, he gave it a name, abandonment melange. All right, your dad, first you only saw him on weekends, abandonment 1, then he died when you were 16, which is very young, and he was the only safe unconditional love that you ever had. All right? And your mom neglected you, which is also abandonment ground zero. So the abandonment issues here are so big that basically anybody you bond with romantically is probably going to get slotted in for you to try to plug in that unmet emotional need and try to go on just like a super suction on that and try to get your needs met out of it. And the terrible truth is an adult can't meet those needs for you. That was a need that was meant for a kid. It was meant to be given by a parent, and it can't be done anymore. Now, recently, I did a video about inner child, and some people find that a helpful metaphor for looking at the person in you who was innocent and who needed help, and they talk about reparenting. That's something you might want to look into. Me, myself, I never really saw myself as like multiple people. That never really made sense to me. But whatever you call it, this is a very, very good time for you to recognize that you have an abandonment wound. So you say you've had 6 relationships, and I'm going to bet you probably felt kind of like this, like afraid of the end more than you wanted to be, you know, staying past the time that you wanted to, or getting broken up with, except for the ones you didn't care about at all. And even then, even the ones that we don't care about trigger abandonment melange, you know, just even thinking about leaving somebody, even when you don't like them, can trigger abandonment melange. Now that word refers to 3 emotions. It's like a super high electricity panic, rage, and grief. So you're so sad, you're so angry, and you're so frightened that you can hardly function. And it starts to get wired into you, like hold on to relationships for dear life, even if they make you miserable, even if you're constantly in a circular argument. I totally know how that is. So Belinda, I have a surprising suggestion for you, okay? I don't think you have to leave right this second. I think leaving is in the cards. I think that's probably where things are headed. One of you is going to leave the other one. It doesn't mean either one of you is bad, but here's what I'm going to suggest to you so that whatever happens as each day unfolds in this relationship or out of this relationship, you start to have some equilibrium inside that protects you against the terror of being alone in the world, all right? Because you're 24, you know this intellectually, but you could have a job and an apartment, maybe some housemates. That's a really suitable way of life for a 24-year-old woman, right? You can live with some housemates and go on some dates, have some friends, primarily to start having those female friends in your life that are neutral, that aren't you getting bonded and attached in a romantic and sexual way with somebody when you have this huge abandonment wound that's not healed yet. So staying unattached for a while can be incredibly powerful and healing, and it can change the whole caliber of relationship that you're going to have in the future. But what needs to happen during that time is a healing of the trauma that happened in the past. And now you have some extra traumas that came to you in relationships. So what I'm going to suggest to you, Rachel, is the daily practice. I say it in a lot of videos, but seriously, this is something that you can do that's very comforting. If you feel rejected, if you're going into abandonment melange, you can say to yourself, oh, I'm having abandonment melange. This is an emotional reaction from my childhood. And right away you can reduce the intensity, I don't know, 50%, that's my experience. Then you sit down with your paper and you begin to write your fears and resentments, because that's what's going on, is a whole bunch of thinking of these dreaded emotions. And you begin to name them and write them. This is the technique that I was shown when I was in the middle of the worst abandonment melange of my life. I mean, it was bad. And somebody came along and showed me this, and I had an outlet to put it all on paper, all in the form of fears and resentments, and then to ask for it to be removed, and then go into meditation and rest my mind, my poor mind that felt like it had been dragged over gravel for years. And I got to rest it, and I got to feel that sweetness and rest, and feel a little bit refreshed and have a new experience. And I think these abandonment wounds run so deep, they're pre-verbal, it's very hard to get at them by talking about them, but if you begin to just write the emotions that are coming up now, day by day, twice a day, at the top layer at a time, not trying to analyze. You can learn the whole, I teach it, there's a 40-minute course. I'm gonna put a quiz. Do you have CPTSD? So you can take that, Belinda, and you can see, do you relate to these symptoms? I list 20 symptoms of CPTSD, and you can see, is that a symptom? Because if it's a symptom, then you know. You know, this is just a normal reaction that people get when they were neglected and abused as kids. That's what's going on. And it's affecting your choice of people, it's affecting how the relationship goes, and it's affecting your vision of your life, of whether you can see yourself getting out. I'm telling you, if I could go back in time and talk to myself when I was in situations just like the one you're in, this is what I'd tell myself. I'd say, learn to comfort yourself, Anna. Get this daily practice that you're not going to learn until you're 30, but learn it when you're 24. I mean, it would have changed my life. I would have liked to have learned it earlier than that. To learn to get some comfort and ease and get those thoughts out and be okay enough to go live with the girlfriends in an apartment and have a job and be happy and prepare and heal and finally to date, so that when I met somebody who was a really good match for me and I was fairly healed, we could have a good relationship. That's how it's done, all right? That's what we didn't get taught. That's the memo you didn't get from your parents who were already in their trauma and going through their thing. So I hope this helps you. So hang out, stay in the relationship or leave, but get into that daily practice. So everybody, if you love this topic, if you love hearing me answer questions from people in the audience, you can send one to me at hello@crappychildhoodfairy.com and put in the subject line, Ask the Fairy, so I know that's what it is. If you just love hearing these things, make sure you subscribe and you'll get a notification every time a new video comes out. And if you love this topic of relationships and how to make them healthier, I picked out one that I think you're gonna like. It's about unavailable people, and it's right here. And right here is the video that YouTube believes will be the best for you. You decide which one was the best one for you, and I'll see you very soon.